Well, let's get you a wider perspective now on the US midterms and specifically the economy. I'm joined in studio by Steve Pruitt. He's a managing partner at Watts Partners. He's also the former staff director of the Committee on the Budget of the US House of Representatives. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So we know that historically these midterm elections don't usually generate this much attention and conversation, let alone a lot that we're seeing with this early voting turnout. Just how significant is this election?
Well, I think, as your previous spokespersons have noted, many people have deemed this the most important election in their lives. And quite frankly, what I think is starting to play out now is people are realizing that every election is important now. 2016 taught a lot of people some very true and significant lessons about civic participation. And I think what we're seeing now is how that's going to play out, not only for 2018, but if you think this is significant, wait until 2020.
Indeed. Now, we know that a lot of people are keeping an eye on the economy and how well it's doing in the US. How key is that going to be in this election for voters?
Well, I think the difference that folks have to look at is that forecasting around the economy is probably a little more accurate than polling for our elections. There's so many X factor issues in these elections that you can't take the polling as gospel. But certainly the projections for the economy suggest that the U.S. economy is slowing down, the global economy is going to slow down as well. Some of that is self-inflicted, obviously, with this trade war that the U.S. has begun. And I think what we're going to see over time is continuing shrinking of the stock market and problems in that sector. The farm economy, as your spokesperson, your reporter from Iowa noted, is still months away from even the hope of any relief.
Right.
And with the futures contracts that have already started to be discussed, it's not looking good in one of the major sectors. And then you add that to the other pieces that are also starting to slow. We may well be looking at a significant slowdown, not a recession for 2020, but it's going to be slow enough that some people who are today willing to give our leaders, from the president down, an opportunity to exercise some of these proposed policies.
Right.
They're not going to be very patient for very long.
So I'm going to ask you to try and do a little bit of forecasting here. Obviously, right now we have a Republican-controlled Congress. How might things change if there are either more Democrats or a democratically controlled Congress for the economy?
Well, first, I think it's not going to be a Democratic controlled in both houses. I have said for months now and projected to people that the Senate will change in terms of its composition, but probably not a lot in terms of the numbers that determine the ability to govern. The only real impact you have with the Republicans maintaining control of the Senate is the ability to confirm judges and possibly confirm some of the president's appointees. With the Democrats taking control of the House as projected right now, two things are going to occur. Number one, the Democratic caucus, contrary to popular belief, is not going to be as liberal as folks are trying to portray it. If you look at many of the people who are running in the Democratic banner this time, soldiers, CIA, experienced folks who really do not come at politics from an activist perspective, but for more of a servant perspective. So they're going to be a lot more conservative, which then gets to my second point, which focuses on really an environment where there's going to be much more of a let's make a deal situation in play, where the Democrats are going to have to be willing to compromise to get things done. And I think looking at the Senate leadership, if it doesn't change, they've clearly been willing to deal on big issues.
Right.
A, and B, given the fact that 24 U.S. senators from the Republican Party will be up next time, the numbers that we see this time reverse in 2020, they've got to deliver much more than they've provided so far. And I think what happened to the discussion around the tax cut this year is probably example one of why they're going to be willing to make more deals.
So given how highly ranked immigration is for voters, how are Democrats and Republicans framing this issue?
Poorly.
How so?
I think, number one, instead of it being a true immigration debate, it really has come down to more of a political debate and ploy. It's more of a marketing effort on the part of brand protection Trump, more than it is any impact on what outcome could occur were Congress to actually engage in a true debate about immigration. Secondly, out of any of the debate that we've seen as part of the election, there's really not been any discussion about options for resolving the matter, how it should be resolved. Simple discussion about building a wall is not going to solve this problem, as we've seen. And then lastly, I would say that it's really been used to stoke a particular part of the Republican base that was really not enthusiastic about this election, in part because the media has been saying for months now that the Democrats were going to win the House, that they had a chance of winning the Senate, and they basically were about to give up hope. So they needed to be stirred up, I mean, from a political perspective. But as far as whether or not we're going to get any true policy outcomes from any of this debate, in my view, the answer is no.
And it does seem like the actual immigration debate is getting lost. We have the migrant caravan. You have a lot of these misperceptions and fear being put out there. And a lot of it is really taking away from what immigration actually does for the U.S. economy. Break that down for us.
Well, we've never had that discussion in recent history, not since the '86 immigration law passed. So it's been a long time coming. As far as its impact on the economy, I think there are many sectors, particularly the agricultural sector this year, who really started to see the impact of what is being parlayed as policy by the inability to get farm workers in to pick the crops, which ultimately then have been double whammied with the trade sanctions against China and other countries, I might add, because again, we focus on China here, but we've had issues with Mexico, we've had issues with Canada, Venezuela, Iran, Iraq, you name it. We've got so many fights going on right now. The only person that's winning is the one who's in the middle throwing no punches.
And we've seen that a lot of this is being framed as either national security risks or economic risks, whether it's the spotlight we saw on the travel ban by the Trump administration that targeted predominantly Muslim countries, the separation of families at the border, some of these questionable comments about African nations and the types of immigrants that Trump said he wanted in the country. Is any of this going to change the narrative if there is a swing by more Democrats?
Again, the short answer is no. I believe, if anything, it's going to get worse. I mean, we've really only seen the tip of the spear here. The rest that's behind it is just as deadly and divisive and part of what we should accept as part of the marketing effort from a president who's really not focused on the policy. He's only focused on what it takes to protect his brand and ultimately get him in position, he hopes, for re-election in 2020. I'm hopeful that with a Democratic majority in the House, that maybe there will be some proposals put out there that will gain some public attention and traction.
We'll certainly have to see a lot at stake, obviously. Thank you. Always good to have you on. Steve Pruitt there, Managing Director at Watts Partners.